Welcome to You're Not Broken, Just Rewiring, a free audiobook podcast by me, Glenn Ostlund. Chapter 9, Inspiration from the Gene Keys. Is it just me, or did some of the strangest things I was taught as a kid turn out to be right? Not literally, not doctrinally, but poetically, functionally, in the way that still moves through my nervous system, lighting up reward structures installed long before I had language, reactivating old circuitry like scent does memory. I was reminded of this recently when a client shared a story with me. He had watched a video of a 14-year-old girl who described having a near-death experience. In that experience, she said she met Jesus, and Jesus told her that phones are creating chains, like energetic tethers wrapped around people's necks, casting shadows that keep them from growing, from feeling, from hearing the help that's trying to reach them. Jesus said that the time we spend on our phones creates distraction that distorts divine signals, that it makes it hard for people to receive the guidance and love that's always available, but often drowned out. My client wasn't sure what to make of it. He didn't know if it was true. Maybe the girl made it up. Maybe it was just a dream. But what mattered to him wasn't whether it happened. What mattered was what it did. Something about that video reached into his life and resonated with a part of him that felt distorted, off balance. He recognized how his phone use was pulling him away from his kids, away from the things that mattered most. So he set it down. He was more present. And he had one of the best weeks he had had in a long time. Later, a friend challenged him. How do you know that girl didn't make it up? And that's when he asked me what I thought. What I told him is what I've been saying all along. It depends on the lens. If you're asking whether the story is literally true, whether this girl really saw Jesus, whether she crossed over into some metaphysical realm, we simply can't know. That's the realm of form. And form is slippery. But if you ask what it did, what it moved, what it awakened, that's function. And function is tangible. It's trackable in the nervous system. The story gave him a sense of clarity. It invited him into coherence. And for him, that's truth. And when he asked me that, I found myself thinking about my own relationship with these kinds of stories, especially with the channeled texts I've been exploring in this book. A friend once asked me, how do you know any of this stuff is real? How do you know you're not just gravitating toward ideas that are familiar because of the way you were raised? And my answer is, I am. Of course I am. But why should I resist that? Why should I pathologize my own patterns? My neural circuitry, the reward systems, the sense-making scaffolds, they were laid down early. I was formed in a particular symbolic environment. That doesn't mean I'm stuck in it. It means I can work with it. There are parts of the tradition I came from that are out of alignment with who I want to be, yes. But there are other parts, patterns of hope, vision, transcendence, that still resonate. Why would I throw out that just because the source wasn't perfect? And maybe that's what this whole book is about. Not erasing what formed us. Not me telling you that the forms that resonate with me should also resonate with you, but recognizing the functions behind the forms. And more specifically, your functions behind the forms. And then harvesting them. Finding the seeds inside the system, letting the nervous system lead us not away from our roots, but through them, into something more honest, more coherent. And that's what the gene keys have helped me do. They're not an escape from my past. They're a way to retune it, to take the circuits I was already wired with and run new signals through them, not by force, not by proof, but by resonance. Because sometimes truth isn't about what happened, it's about what happens next. Take this, for example. As man is, God once was. As God is, man may become. A Mormon mantra I swallowed whole long before I had the teeth to chew on it. The idea that humanity isn't fallen, but rising. That divinity isn't a prize for obedience, but an inherited potential constantly unfolding, whether we can see it or not. As man is, God once was. As God is, man may become. That phrase lit me up before I understood it was heresy in other traditions. And even after I let go of the framework that offered it, I never let go of the flame. Because somewhere along the spiral, through trauma theory, polyvagal mapping, mystical texts, and metaphorical rewiring, I heard the echo again. Not in the voice of a prophet, in the voice of a poet. Richard Rudd didn't restore the priesthood. He didn't build a church. He didn't rewrite scripture or claim authority over sacredness. What he did was subtler. He listened to a frequency beneath language. And then, like a dragonfly skimming the surface of the pond, he gave it shape. The spiral so far. We've spiraled through symptom and system, through the tip of whimsy to the tension of pain, from Ra's architecture to Seth's improvisation. We've mapped polarity, reframed pathology as adaptation, explored densities and neuroplasticity, and remembered that we are layered beings made of signal and story. Now, with the gene keys, the spiral tightens, not by adding something new, but by refracting everything we've already touched through a new lens, one that harmonizes, one that sings. A divine whisper named Cami. I didn't find the gene keys through study. I found them through resonance, through Cami. That's not just her name, it's her frequency. Cami, or Kami, means divine in Japanese. And like many of the sacred things in my life, she didn't arrive with credentials. She arrived as a tuning fork. It was during COVID. The world had gone quiet. We were suspended in stillness, scrolling through one of those strange YouTube spirals that only happens when routine dissolves into dream. Someone we were watching mentioned the gene keys, almost as a side note. Cami's ears perked. That's all it took. She said, "We need to find that." Not because of logic, because of data, because her body felt it. So we followed the spark. We pulled on the thread, and what unraveled was a whole other language. At first, I'll admit, the name threw me off a little. Gene keys? It sounded like something out of Scooby-Doo.
Gene keys.
Sorry. A riddle to be solved in a haunted laboratory, or a new age MLM with questionable supplements. But within minutes of reading the introduction, I felt the edges of that prejudice soften. Within hours, I was hooked. And within days, we were all in. It wasn't just the content. It was the tone. The feeling that this wasn't something demanding belief. It was offering recognition. Richard Rudd and the Music of Meaning. Richard Rudd doesn't claim to be a prophet. He's not interested in building altars. He calls the gene keys transmissions, not doctrines, resonances, invitations. He offers them not as rules, but as rhythms. What moves me the most isn't even the words on the page. It's his voice, his contemplations, the cadence of someone who's listening while speaking. He doesn't try to impress. He attunes. He doesn't pretend to be chosen. He simply offers what passes through him with reverence. And in that humility, I find trust. He doesn't claim certainty. He admits limitation. It's all the things I wanted Joseph Smith to be, without the shenanigans, without the hierarchy, without the fine print that turned grace into exclusivity. The Gene Keys speak a universal language, and they feel intimately personal, like a mirror that reflects not what you are, but what you're becoming. Shadow, gift, city. At the heart of each gene key is a spiral of transformation. Shadow, gift, city. Not a hierarchy, a resonance map. The shadow is not sin. It's not failure. It's not something to be fixed. It's protection. It's adaptation. It's a story that once made sense but no longer fits. It's the mud. The gift is not escape. It's emergence. It's what happens when the system updates, when you meet the shadow with presence instead of punishment, when the pattern softens and repurposes itself. The city is the shimmer beneath the landscape. Not a destination, a return. Not something to strive for, but something remembered in stillness. The breath after the exhale. Think of it as a seed. The shadow is the seed. Dense, dormant, full of potential, buried in the mud. The gift is the sprout, breaking through the soil, reaching for light, fueled by awareness and the nutrients of presence. The city is the bloom, not just a moment of beauty, but a phase of effortless radiance. And from that bloom comes new seeds, new fruit, a self-propagating cycle that nourishes the world. The city isn't something you perform. It's what radiates from you when the gift becomes second nature, when the pathways in your nervous system have practiced the pattern enough times that it no longer takes effort. It becomes how you live, how you love, how you lead. It spills out of you like light, without calculation, without pride, without even needing to be noticed. This framework doesn't shame your symptoms. It dignifies them. It doesn't erase the wound. It honors its wisdom. The shadow isn't blocking your gift. It contains it. Form becomes function. Glitch becomes guide. This wasn't just a theory for me. One of the first times I felt the shift happen in real time, it came through something small, something ordinary. Cammie and I had been listening to the Gene Keys together for a while. One day we were in the backyard, talking about something I don't even remember now, but I do remember the feeling. I thought I understood something she didn't. I felt superior. Pride. A small, quiet sense of knowing better. Later, I walked inside and stood in front of the mirror to brush my teeth. The thought returned. Some flavor of, she just doesn't get it. And then, right there, something clicked. A recognition. A breath. A neural shift. The bud breaking out of the soil. I saw the shadow. It wasn't hidden in the dark. It was staring back at me in the form of my own reflection. Pride. One of the shadows in my gene key profile. One I'd been listening to in contemplations for weeks. And in that moment, I realized I was doing it. I was acting from the shadow. And I laughed. Because instead of shaming myself, I let the awareness be enough. I went to Cammie and apologized. Not for having thoughts, but for letting those thoughts block connection. I realized how often I had done this, not just with her, but in so many relationships. My pride had become a mask, a strategy, a barrier. It had kept me from seeing others clearly. And as that pattern softened, something shifted. The gift wasn't perfection. It was presence. It was the ability to lean differently, to bring curiosity instead of control. And in doing that, I started to notice how much more beauty entered my life, how many more gifts became visible when I stopped guarding myself with arrogance. It wasn't just about that one moment with Cammie. It was a pattern, a lifetime of adapted strategies that had once helped me feel safe powerful and in control, but now were costing me connection. The awareness of that pattern was a threshold, and once I crossed it, I began to see other places in my life where pride and comparison had kept me isolated, not just in romantic relationships, but friendships, family, coworkers, strangers. And that shadow, the pride, wasn't malicious, it was protective. It had helped me survive. It had helped me navigate the complex social coding of Mormonism, where being chosen, obedient, and above reproach was the currency of value. It wasn't just pride in a vacuum. It was a reward loop, one deeply shaped by my earliest environments. I've written earlier in this book about the impact of Mormonism on my nervous system, and this shadow runs right through that terrain. I remember being in high school, surrounded by friends who partied, drank, slept around, and there I was, the model Mormon kid, mostly. Clean, upright, obedient, and proud of it. Damn it. Although I would have never said damn it, that would have just invalidated the whole thing. Proud in a way that created distance. Judgment. Like that first grade teacher that I had an innocent crush on, quietly disqualifying her in my mind the moment I found out she drank coffee. That was the wiring, that was the script. And in that script, I became the good one, the better one, the chosen one, the one whose version of Little House in the Middle of the Woods was much superior than any other version that might have two words differently. But that form of pride didn't draw me closer to people. It distanced me. And it wasn't until much later, through podcasting, through therapy, through folklore studies, through intensely introspective experiences, that I began to see the cost of it. That every person has a life no one else can fully know. Even identical twins raised in the same home develop distinct experiential landscapes. To assume I knew better wasn't just false, it was arrogant, and that arrogance wasn't noble. It was afraid. It was guarding something I hadn't yet dared to feel. So now, when I feel that old pride rising, the subtle sense of superiority, I pause, I breathe, I recognize the shadow, and I ask it what it's trying to protect. And more often than not, I can feel the shift, the space that opens, the gift in the very process of emerging. And what about the city? It's a word that used to feel foreign to me, floaty, esoteric. It's not city like, what city are you from? It's a Sanskrit word, which means to succeed, to accomplish, or to attain. And now, I relate to it differently. I don't think of it as a superpower or a spiritual trophy. I think of it as stability, the place in the nervous system where the gift becomes effortless, where the pattern no longer has to be activated consciously, it just flows. It blooms, like a flower that doesn't have to work to be beautiful, it simply is. And I think about that word, city, because it does sound like city, a place, a collective, a pattern of resonance so coherent that it becomes visible to others. It shapes them. It influences them. It plants seeds in their soil. I think of the shadow as the seed, the gift as the sprout, and the city as the flowering. When the beauty and the fragrance of transformation ripple outward into the relational field. This is how neural pathways form, through repetition, through leaning, through awareness and choice. First, effortfully, then habitually, then eventually they become the nature of the person, not fixed, but stabilized, integrated, expressed. And when I zoom out even further, I see how this mirrors larger cycles. Ra's concept of harvest, the idea that we pass through phase transitions, that at certain points in time, individual coherence ripples outward, forming collective scaffolds for what comes next. Just like stable molecules become the foundation for living cells. Just like single cells become stable communities before multicellular organisms emerge. Just like nervous systems had to evolve before self-awareness could blink open its eyes. We grow by leaning into our patterns, by facing the shadow, not fleeing it. And when we do, the gift emerges. And from the gift, something even more beautiful begins to hum beneath the surface. Influence, fragrance, impact, an entire city blooming from a single seed. The dragonfly and the fire. I first heard the dragonfly metaphor from Richard Rudd, and it landed in me so deeply that I've been carrying it ever since, threading it through this book, not because I thought it was mine, but because it resonated so completely. It gave shape to something I had felt but hadn't yet named. The dragonfly begins its life in the mud, hidden, armored, submerged. It lives for years in darkness, in water, never knowing the sky exists. And then one day, something inside it responds to a signal, a pull, not from logic, but from timing, from resonance. It climbs, emerges, unfolds wings it didn't know it had, and flies. It doesn't reject the mud, it rises because of it. That's what the gene keys offer. Not escape, but integration. The shadow becomes the lift. The pain becomes the path. The darkness becomes the place where wings are formed. That image holds everything I've come to understand about nervous system transformation, about trauma, about belief, about the spiral of growth. You don't climb out of the shadow by denying it. You climb through it by letting it speak. And when it's heard, when it's met without shame, something inside softens, sprouts, emerges. There's a fire in that flight. Not the fire of destruction, but of transmutation. The kind of fire that refines, that reshapes. It doesn't burn the dragonfly, it reveals it. The mud never stopped it from being what it was. It simply prepared the path. And when I think about what this metaphor has meant to me, how it has helped me reframe my past, my pride, my resistance, I understand why it stayed with me. Not because it's clever, but because it's cellular, poetic, precise. Because, like the dragonfly, I'm still unfolding, still rising, still remembering what I already carry. The 55th Gene Key, From Victimhood to Freedom. And I want to share with you one of my favorite gene keys. It's the 55th. Its shadow is victimhood. Its gift is freedom. Its city is a collective awakening. Richard doesn't whisper here, he sings. He speaks of a planetary nervous system repatterning from fear to coherence. A gentle shift from constriction to openness, from survival to sovereignty, not because we obeyed, but because we remembered. Because the soul doesn't respond to pressure, it responds to resonance. And I see that echo in my own journey. I once lived in a system that rewarded obedience, comparison, and control. Mormonism taught me to find worth in being better than others. I didn't drink, I didn't smoke, I didn't rebel, and in those choices, I found superiority coated in virtue. But what I didn't realize was that the very system that made me feel special also made me feel alone. My heart was closed, even when my actions were polished. The resistance to letting go of that pride didn't feel like resistance at first. It felt like righteousness, like clarity, like certainty. But it was a wall. And when that wall began to crack, when I started really listening to others, podcasting, studying folklore, sitting with clients, it became clear that everyone's path is different. Every nervous system tells a different story. And my real work wasn't to teach others to see like me, but for me to see them. That's what the gift offered me. A new kind of curiosity, a new kind of presence. And in that presence, my relationships became different, mutually beneficial, coherent, kind. And that's been the city, what flows through me now with less effort. Not a fixed state, but a stabilizing resonance, a tuning fork for how I want to live. Not because I figured it out, but because I felt it open. The mirror and the meaning. The gene keys don't hand you meaning. They hand you a mirror, one that changes every time you look, one that reflects not just who you are, but how you're choosing to be. It's not truth with a capital T. It's tuning, a way of organizing chaos into a chord, a way of watching your shadows dance until they start to hum. I like to think of it as the kaleidoscopic imprint of life upon the fabric of mind, a living Rorschach test, where what you see reveals how you're seeing. And when that gaze turns inward, not to judge, but to join, something incredible happens. We soften, we shimmer, we begin to accept our spiral. Because we're not broken, we're rewiring. Always.